So win totals, I think if you are, I don't know, none of the sports, look, maybe one sports book has officially put out win totals for the season, but Nebraska's win total is going to be at 7.5. I'm pretty secure that isn't going to change.
Yeah.
Interesting about win totals. And again, I think Nebraska's win total is predicated on what they do on the road with Maryland, Minnesota, UCLA, and Penn State. You can go from anywhere from 6 to 9, but 7.5. A lot of people will hit the over again to go 8-4, at least 8-4. But you want to explain to me something here?
Yeah,
you're a little sleuth.
Yep.
Man, who will be the Indiana of 2025? A team in the Big Ten gets mentioned quite frequently.
Mm-hmm.
They are in Champaign, Illinois. They have their returning quarterback. They return their tackles. They return 18 starters. They won 10 football games last year. They have Brett Bielema, who knows how to win in the Big Ten. So if there's going to be an Indiana of 2025 in the Big Ten or in college football, a lot of people will say it'll be the Fighting Illini. But they also say, will Illinois be on the list of preseason top 10 teams that finish the year unranked?
Yeah.
But riddle me this.
Yeah.
Why does Illinois and Nebraska have the same win total?
Couldn't tell you. It makes it. Well, I'll tell you
7.5 is their win total.
I'll tell you why. Because I think it really boils down to no one, like there's no casual college football fans who look at Illinois and are saying, hey, that's a football power. That's a traditional power. Illinois doesn't have the history of winning and doesn't have, you go to Champaign, Illinois, those students who go there, they don't go to the football games, right? They watch those football games from their band. They don't, or from all those bars. They don't have those like in-rooted traditions. This is what we do. You show up to Champaign and you play football. Like that's just not a football school. That's a basketball school.
Now he's made it respectable.
Oh,
like compared to
Brett Bielema,
the two guys that were there previously.
But Illinois' success isn't necessarily rooted in, it's Illinois. It's rooted in the fact that Brett Bielema is one hell of a coach. And he's been able to recruit really well, and then even better than that, develop incredibly well. I mean, Illinois has, over the last couple of years, have had some really high draft picks. And so I think this just boils down to, if you know, when it comes to Illini football. If you know that they're bringing back, I think it's 19 returning starters from a team that, if they didn't lose to Minnesota last year, would have been in that fringe college football playoff conversation. If you know, Luke Altmaier took massive steps from 2 seasons ago to last season and is poised to take another step like that. Like, I think this is just a classic. Vegas is looking at the names and looking at the national headlines and looking at the titles, and you have to dig deeper to find out that Illinois has a real chance of making the college football playoff. Then you have to dig to find out that, hey, Nebraska could potentially turn.
Things, because this was a discussion yesterday. There was a lot of college football talk on national Sirius XM yesterday, and then on ESPN, is who has an Indiana-type schedule where in the top tier of the Big Ten, you maybe only play one or two of those teams, and you have a lot more teams that you're on your schedule that are, like I said yesterday, they're equal or below you.
Yeah.
Where, Nebraska will have 6 of those.
Yeah.
They only have Indiana and Ohio State. Probably the only 2 teams on their schedule right now that are going to be preseason top 25. They do have a trip to Seattle. They do have a trip to Madison, but they have an Indiana-like schedule that sets you up for a potential college football playoff trip if you take care of business.
I think this. Look,
but they both have 7.5 is their win total. That's kind of interesting.
Washington is a trap game for them for sure. I think Rutgers could be a trap game for them as well. Illinois, historically, in the later parts of the year when they're playing at home, just always seem to drop a game that they should win. They've done that even under Brett Bielema. But if you're just looking at this from a plain, let's just look at this. They're going to be favored in 10 of their games. Like they are going to be favored. Like they're playing USC at home, right? If they were on the road, maybe that would be, depending on what happens, throughout the season, maybe that they could be an underdog, but they're not because they're at home. So this Indiana game early on in the year, week 4, their first Big Ten game of the season, you could argue is probably the most important game of the year, because from that point on, you're going to have one game for the rest of the season that you truly are going to be an underdog in, and that Ohio State game is at home. I mean, this Illinois team has a legitimate path to 11-1. Like not just a if it swings here, if it swings there. No, they have a legit, straightforward path to only losing one game against Ohio State, which, heck, you never know what can happen in that regard. Nebraska nearly beat Ohio State last season on the road. Like, it's, we played the games for a reason, but they have a really talented defensive line. They have some talent. Losing Josh McCray is pretty tough for them. He ended up transferring to Georgia. They lost Pat Bryant, which is going to be tough to replace for them. He was a dynamic wide receiver, but that defense is going to be real stingy this year. And I'm impressed with how they've been able to recoup all that talent after losing Ryan Walters, because I think losing Walters, I was worried for them after that happened because he was just such a dynamic defensive coordinator. The fact that they've been able to kind of recover from that and still have solid defenses has been impressive from Bielema.
The best thing he did all offseason was he retained guys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so Indiana's win total is 8.5.
Got to look at their schedule. I know that they have a much tougher schedule than.
But it's not. It's not a daunting schedule. But do you flip the switch of once you get the taste? And Cignetti can't get Notre Dame out of his mouth. He keeps bringing up Notre Dame all the time. Now, the one thing about Indiana, who has a quarterback, Mr. O'Rourke, is going to be at an NFL camp.
Yeah.
They love Fernando Mendoza. Remember that name. There is now starting a hype train with NFL scouts for him.
Man,
But Indiana now has a win total of 8.5. The other thing, Bielema retained talent. One thing that is key for Cignetti after the success that they had in his first year in Bloomington is he retained his staff. The majority of his coaching staff returned for another year in Bloomington. They didn't ride the gravy train out of town to bigger and better jobs. They stuck around. I think that's important with a program that's in year 2 where they don't have the influx of all the transfers.
Yeah.
So now they're established, and also people know who they are. Like, you're not going to overlook Indiana this year.
That's how you, things like that decimate a program in a way, because you have 1 year where you're incredible. You come out the chute. Nobody expects you to be there. And then immediately you lose some of the guys who helped build that culture, right? Indiana had 1 year of success, but you need more than just 1 year of success to actually build sustainability. And losing guys who establish that within the building that aren't named Curt Cignetti is a massive way to derail that. But one over-under I'm looking at here, and it's mainly to do because of the schedule, but it's really interesting to talk about, is Wisconsin. Their over-under right now is 5.5. And granted, they play Illinois, Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, Iowa, Michigan, and then they have their non-con against Bama. I mean, what happens if Luke Fickell goes 5-7 this year? Right? And that's a guy that a lot of people here in Nebraska, were interested in hiring as their head coach, who was hired during the same process as Matt Rhule. I wonder I would just love to know what Wisconsin, that athletic department, is thinking, because you could make hey, you just haven't won enough here for us to, justify you having another year. We tried doing something new. We have to pivot. We got to go back to what we were doing before, because clearly it was working better than when you showed up here. At the same time,
you mean with a individual or
with Fickell,
their style? You say Fickell out.
Yes. And go ahead and you look at it, or you can make the excuse of, man, that was a really tough schedule. There aren't a lot of coaches who would have been able to coach through that. Actually, the fact that you won 6 games is impressive enough. We're going to give you another year, but next year you got to be better. I think it's a fascinating discussion with Wisconsin, because I don't necessarily think they're going to be a bad team, and I like the addition. I like Billy Edwards Jr. a lot, and I think that he could, be an impact player for them at quarterback. But it is a daunting task they have this season.
I would think getting to 7 wins at Wisconsin this year would be a feat for that group.
That would be a big win for them, which is crazy to talk about. But I mean, this schedule, this 4-week stretch.
They got 3 playoff teams on their schedule. That's enough.
This 4-week stretch at Ann Arbor, home against Iowa, home against Ohio State, at Oregon. That is crazy.
Well, and then they got Michigan and Illinois on that schedule as well.
Yeah, and by the way, no bye weeks too during that. That is back-to-back-to-back games.
Fickle did an interview. I think it was with The Athletic. He was pretty honest about where the program was and the mistakes he made in his first 2 years. But welcome, your win total is 5.5, and you're looking at that schedule where before you even get into the meat and potatoes of the Big Ten schedule, you got to play Alabama. Iowa JD tweets. He says, I can bet Wisconsin radio shows are saying the same thing about Nebraska. Nebraska's schedule is not like that.
No, not daunting. I think they were saying the same things about, hey, they're probably saying the opposite, right? I mean, they're saying if Matt Rhule doesn't win this amount of games
can we get Houston
with
Christian?
This week's schedule, then that might be grounds for him to get let go. That's probably what they're saying. That's not what I'm saying.
You are a year 3 gotta go guy. You're pretty passionate about that.
I'm a year. Well, I need to see. I need to see more than just
a
one-win progress. Like I want to see an actual jump. I want to see actual like.
What was your? You said if Rhule goes 6-6, you should be fired.
Should be and will be is a different thing, but should be, yeah. There should be is what are we doing here, right? Like 6-6. You have the 5-star quarterback. You've had 3 years to not only just bring in your own high school recruits, but develop those high school recruits, and then on top of that, with the use of the portal, the tool of the portal, we've seen plenty of other teams who've been able to dip in there, grab guys, not only that are mercenaries, but develop them as well and have instant success. And, you know, I'm an advocate for giving coaches a little bit more time, more so than pulling the plug quickly. At the same time, though, like the amount of resources and money and the flexibility that he's been able to have and the fact that he's been able to fully control this program the way he has, if they go 6-6, my question is, how does this get better? Like, what else more do you need to get this program to where it should be? So that's how I look at it. But I wouldn't call.
I think they're anywhere from 6 wins to 9 wins, by the way, this season.
I'm in the same boat. I'm in the same exact boat, but at this point right now, after this spring, I think I'm more leaning towards the left side of that as opposed to the right side. But
so more towards
6-7, 6-6, or 7-5, in my opinion. That's kind of where I see it right now. But yeah, I'm a year 3 guy because that's.
So let me ask you this.
That's what we've been preaching. So, that's what we've been saying. That's part of the reason why you.
So if they were 6-6 this year, something major had to have happened, like injuries, and they were decimated.
Yes.
What? So after spring, you've gone closer to 6-6.
Just based on the reports and just based on what I've heard and based on the injury to Jalen George, this interior defensive line needs to play well, needs to do well. They are not only just young and don't have a ton of production, but they are filling the shoes of guys who arguably were your 2 best players last year. And I wanted to end the spring hearing about and people raving about the interior defensive line. I wanted people to say, man, Cam Lenhart has taken a jump. Keanu Davis looks absolutely incredible. Man, Williams Winery, he looks like the next Randy Gregory. That's what I wanted to hear. And I haven't heard that, right? And so now I haven't heard like, oh my God, they're terrible. This is going to be awful or anything like that. But I'm very worried about that interior. And I'm very worried about their pass rush and the fact that we went throughout an entire spring and those weren't really the sentiments that we were hearing. Yeah, that kind of shifted me a little bit toward more 7-5 than it did toward 9-3. But they had the schedule to go 9-3.
That'd be a long 2025 season reaction. It wouldn't be over. It'd be reaction if Nebraska was 6-6 or 7-5.
Well, and isn't it incredible though the difference that one game makes, right? Because if we're 7-5, if we're 7-5,
I think not one game. I think there's 4 games. That's why if you're in the window of 6 to 9, the 4 road games are mammoth. Maryland, Minnesota, Penn State, UCLA.
I just think that it's incredible, though, that we go, man, if they're 7-5, we're going to have a long reactions worth of football. But if they win one more game, if they're 8-4, you win one more game, and we're like, man, hey, they're going in the right direction. Maybe they didn't take as big as a jump as we were hoping, but we're definitely climbing up the hill. There's definitely things to look forward to. Maybe last year we were a year away and we end up, we won 8 games, and this is the year we pivot. And then you go 7-5 though, and you're like, man, what are we doing? Like that one game. I think that swing game, there is a world for sure where they just lose to Minnesota. I think that swing game could be Maryland.
You volunteering for overreaction.
Game. I think that one game that could swing the season is at Maryland.
I've said 2 games will tell me more than the Michigan game, and that's the first game of the year and the trip to Minnesota.
I think that
if you're gauging progress,
sure.
Like that Nebraska game, in the past, they don't win those games. They have preseason hype. They play a team that they're going to be a touchdown favorite. Everybody's expecting them to win. What do? They lay an egg. Then you go to a place where Minnesota's owned you. Okay, Minnesota has beat you. Minnesota is perceived in 2025 not to be on the level of Nebraska, but over the course of time, Minnesota just wins. And it's a place where you don't win. And it's a place that's sent guys to the league more than you have.
Yeah.
And you want to make fun of their head coach, but you're like, damn, he wins. So to go on the road, where I think the road is where you judge this team. If you win a game like that, I'm like, okay, things are different compared to the previous